Hello there, and welcome to another exciting mini-episode of the Extreme Improv podcast skill show. So, in this week's show, we're going to be talking about sharing the stage. I will just very quickly mention a couple of things, that if this is your first time listening to the skill show, then please do subscribe wherever you subscribe to your podcasts. If you are listening just to the skill show, then know that if you subscribe to the Extreme Improv podcast on iTunes, Spotify, etc., then as well as getting the Extreme Improv skill show, you'll also get our comedy show, Extreme Improv podcast Radio Rumble, and our chat show where we interview different actors, comedians, improvisers, and so on and so forth. But if you are simply here just to talk about skills and to learn something about how to perform improv, then without further ado, we will get on. I forgot if I introduced myself. My name is David Pustansky. I run Extreme Improv, and on today's episode we will be discussing the idea of sharing the stage. So let's say you are an improviser, or you want to become an improviser, or say that you are just an actor and you want to improve your skills in the realm of improv, to share the space with your fellow performers. There's lots and lots of things you can do this. The first tip I would give, and this is just so you know, just me free flowing. I am literally improvising. I don't have any show notes of what I'm going to say, so I'm just going to give some ideas. But the first thing I will say is put importance onto your scene partner. If you are in a scene, you might be a very important character. The audience may have suggested that you're the royal family, or you're detectives, or someone's on death row, or any number of different scenarios. It could be, or a school teacher. It doesn't matter what your scenario is, but you may feel that you're an important character. So you could be a king or a queen. You could be a school teacher, a detective, like I said, and then the other person in the scene, your scene partner, perhaps say if you're a police officer, they might be a suspect or a witness, and you might feel that you're the more important character. However, if you put all of your focus and energy into making their character seem important, as you're doing it, as you're making their character seem important, it'll be that you're doing things, or you're saying things, and you're talking, and you're building up their character. Now, likewise, if they do the same, then it will mean that everyone on the stage will seem very important and seem relevant and necessary to tell the story. If you go onto stage and just talk about yourself, then you're building yourself up, and it might be leaving the other performer or performers behind. But if you always try to include the other people by making them seem important, then as you're making them seem important, you'll be doing something yourself, so you are still important, and it builds everyone up. The second thought I would give on this same idea is that if you just talk about yourself and try and make yourself seem important, and try and establish your own character and build up everything about the part you're playing, there's the chance that it's going to come across that you're a self-centered character, which may not be what you want. It may not be your acting choice. There's the risk that people won't believe your character, and it's not that they'll think your character's lying, but just as in real life, where you feel that someone is like, oh god, they're up themselves a lot, or that they're full of chat or whatever. If you just go on stage and be like, I'm in charge here and I'm going to get to the bottom of this mystery, then you'll come across as arrogant. Whereas if you go into the scene and you're like, oh, thank God you're here, speaking to your scene partner, my goodness, I can't believe I've met you, you're the person that solved all these crimes, then, what happened, how did you solve this mystery when such and such and such and such happened? Then you're the one doing all of that talking, but you're setting up the importance of that other character. So you're seeming important because you're the one talking, but you're also passing over the importance to that person. On the flip side of that same scenario, if once you've built them up saying, oh, how did you solve this mystery, they could turn to you and say, well, it was help from the general public like yourself. I can't say too much about how I'm helped by what you observe, and you are the person here, and without the witness then such and such and such and such are, and you both build each other up that way. Whereas if you just go in and build yourself up, so using the same scenario, saying you're the witness, it's like, I saw everything, I can say what happened here, no detective, you don't know what's going on, blah 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 blah, it was terrible, and then she screamed, and so on and so forth. Then again, you're putting the focus and attention on yourself, and it's not sharing the space. And of course, everything I say here, these are just examples, because naturally there will be times where it's relevant or necessary to do this. Sometimes you'll find yourself in a scene, and maybe the people you're in the scene with, their mind might go adrift, they might not know a lot about the subject. So once again, using the police scenario, you might feel like, well, I'm the detective, and I've always watched every episode of CSI and 24, so I can really lay in some of the police jargon to make this seem an enriched scene full of relevant things to the scenario. And sometimes that will happen. What I'm talking about here is, I'm not saying you can't ever big up your own character or say things that enhance and endow yourself. I'm just talking about tactics for how you can share the stage. Another thing you can do is to share the stage is just, if someone else is on the stage in the scene with you and they're talking, you can just give eye contact towards them. Now, they don't necessarily need to be giving you eye contact. And here's a little general acting tip. But if you look to the person who's talking, then the audience will look to that person as well. And if they look to you, they will see that you're looking at that person, and it helps draw the audience's focus to where you want it drawn to. If you're the person talking, then yes, by all means you can look to the scene partner, but you want to always turn things out to the audience. And I don't mean looking directly at the audience, but something you may or may not notice in your everyday to-day life. But when people are talking, as they're thinking of things, they're not always focused directly on the person they're talking to. They'll look to the side, they'll look up, they'll scratch their head, they'll be doing something, using objects. So you can turn a lot of that towards the fourth wall. If you don't quite know what this means, if you've ever heard the term of characters breaking the fourth wall, that means when a character will look towards the audience, look towards the camera, say something towards the audience, or say, whether it's on film or on stage, which just breaks the reality of the fact that the characters are in a play. It's a little nod and a wink to the audience. I'm not saying that you need to do that, but that's just the explanation of what a fourth wall is. If you direct things towards this fourth wall, and it literally means a fourth wall in a room. So if you've got the set of a stage, or the set, say, a television taping of a soap opera or a sitcom, you might, and I'll use Only Fools and Horses or Friends as the example. So say it's set in a pub or Central Perk in Friends. You'll see at the back of this screen, you'll see the door where the characters come in from, and then to the left and to the right, as you face the location, there are two more walls. The fourth wall is the one that you can't see, because that's where the audience and the cameras are positioned. In the reality, in the universe of the characters, there is a wall there, just like if you were in your house and you look around any room you're in, unless it's a very peculiar room, there are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 walls around you, a ceiling above you, and the floor below you. When we're performing on stage or on film, you don't have one of those walls, and that's the missing wall is always referred to as the fourth wall. So if you imagine that you're in your house, you could be looking towards that fourth wall, which is always the one in the direction of your audience. And when you're in your house, there might be a picture on that wall, there might be a window on that wall that you're looking out of, and you can use this just so that you direct your eye contact, well, not your eye contact, but the focus of your eye and your face towards the audience. And why do we want to do that? Just because so much of the storytelling we do, we get from a person's face. It's facial expressions. We look to a character when they're speaking to see how they're feeling about the way they say, about the things they say about. So it might be that they're upset, distressed, angry, sad. They might be trying to hide that, and so the things they say might not necessarily be supporting how they're feeling, or reflecting how they're feeling, rather. And by looking at a character's face, we might be able to see other feelings or emotions that they have. It just builds a greater picture. Likewise, if a character is speaking, we can look to the faces of the character who isn't speaking to gauge their reaction. As human beings, we look to people's eyes, we look to people's facial expressions, just to gauge what is their mood, how do people feel about what's happening, about the scenario, about things that are being said. And so, and again, this does tie into sharing the stage and sharing the scenes in improv, because you don't have to be talking all the time. When you're performing, if a character is talking a lot, you could be reacting. And there's the old expression about acting is reacting, and that's true. There's the further explanation, I suppose, the catchphrase of if acting is reacting, then these catchphrases are just distracting, because they sum things up very neatly, but they're a good starting point. So if you're on stage, you could just be listening, you could just be reacting, you could be giving focus to the other performer. And what I mean, a lot of what I'm saying here is you shouldn't just both be talking at the same time. It's not a case of whoever's loudest gets the focus. I will give a couple of examples of real life situations I've had. And just before I give them, what I'll say here is, if you're performing on stage and you're in an improv show, great. But also, this advice really applies to if you're at something like an audition. Often at auditions, whatever it's for, whether it's improv or not, you might go there and you have to perform a monologue that you've learned, or you might have to perform a scene, or if you go for a commercial audition, you might have to, you'll be given the sides, the script that you have to perform. But then you might just be given a scenario of let's workshop something and do something in character, and just let's say you're at a barbecue, or let's say that you've just received news from this, or you're two people waiting at a bus stop, whatever it is. And if people are just talking constantly, then what will happen is, especially what I say at an audition, because you're trying to specifically win over the person who's running the audition, you're trying to show them what you can do. And what I'd say is restrain yourself from just thinking, I've got to talk, I've got to be the loudest person in the scene, or just I have to have the time where I've given my 50-second speech within this 2-minute improvisation or whatever, because things won't always be equal. Because what you end up with is, if everyone's speaking at the same time, it becomes a wall of noise and no one ends up being able to hear anything. And that goes for if you're at an audition and you're trying to win over someone. They'll just think, God, these guys can't work. They certainly don't have any chemistry together, and whatever they were saying, it might have been good, but I just couldn't hear it, because you can't distinguish between too many sounds at the same time. So the couple of examples I will give is, I've been at auditions where I've been in a scene, and the person I've been in a scene with, they're just constantly talking, and as I've then tried to talk, they talk over me, and they say something to me, and they might even pose a question. And by posing a question, generally, unless someone's trying to make a point, it's because it requires an answer, and as soon as I go to give an answer, they just started rattling off something else. And so I felt like I can't top this. I can't top what is being given to me. The offer being made by my scene partner was frankly, it was a selfish one where they were trying to win an audition. Not that they were my direct competition in this audition, but they were trying to, right, I'm going to maximise my time by using all of it up just for me. But what they lost in doing that is that they didn't get to show themselves off reacting. They didn't get to show off their skills of performing in a team with another performer. And so I made the character choice based on what they were saying. It was as if it was a relationship. I made the character choice that I'm going to go a lot more internal, and because it was like they were ranting at me almost, I was like, right, I'm just going to absorb this for the next 20 or 30 seconds, still hoping that they would pass the baton to me and I'd be able to pick up the race and continue it for a little while, but they didn't. And I was like, right, if I just try to speak at normal speaking level or even slightly raised voice to come in here, it's not going to happen. So I absorbed what they were just talking for 30 odd seconds. I was like, right, suddenly I'm just going to let out something really big and it will shock them and it will grab the attention. And as soon as I suddenly went, okay, or whatever I said at the time, they genuinely, their natural reaction, especially because they'd within these 30 seconds got quite comfortable that I was just going to let them talk. When I suddenly had this, my character had this little outburst, it made them pause. It genuinely made them pause, just like you would in real life if a situation like this happened. And then after this, as soon as I went big, I brought it right back down. And I had the focus and the attention. It had disarmed my scene partner, who was, like I said, not intentionally being selfish, but they just perhaps not an experienced improviser, and they were just hogging the scene. And that's a scenario of sometimes how you can use your skills in improv to take control of a scene, to take control. If someone is dominating something and they're not sharing, sometimes you need to think, right, I'm just going to make my character someone who listens. I'm going to make my character calm or introverted or calculated, or however you want to make them, so that they're not trying to butt heads with the other person one-to-one, because if they're determined to do it, you won't be able to do anything. And if you just end up at their level, you'll come away thinking, well, that was a mess, and they didn't let me get in, and as much as I tried to get in, they wouldn't let me get in. But if you've just tried to get in constantly, then they can come away and say, well, as much as I tried to get in, they just kept talking. So at some point you just have to make the decision that, right, I'm going to withdraw slightly and I will pick my moment. And in this specific example I gave here, I felt like, right, a big outburst for 1 or 2 words, a split second, and then I'm going to bring it right back down. Because also, in terms of the audition, which I did get, by the way, but in terms of the audition, it meant that I'd seem at first like I was trying to be on the same level, talk. When it didn't work, then I went very introspective, I went very internalised. And then suddenly there was a big burst and it was showing a different emotion. I was showing like a range of different things. And then I brought it right back down, calm, and it actually allowed me to have a much more fleshed out character. And one of the big thoughts I had from this was that in a sense it was a gift. Just because the other person, because also fortunately I was auditioning in front of someone who was a very experienced director, and they could see and they understood what was happening, and the feedback I got is that I made the right choices. They could see that I was making way for the other person to have their stage time, and then I did what I needed to be able to give myself the focus for a moment. I did have another example, it's kind of slipped my mind at the moment. But what other tips can I give for sharing the stage? To share the stage, so an important thing is, if you're doing performance improvisation, if it's long form or short form, is you're going to end up miming. And I often use the term working with the invisible, and I don't mean invisible people. It is literally just miming, but people get a very specific idea of what miming means sometimes. So I mean, like, you're in an invisible set, in an invisible environment, and if you're just stood centre stage looking opposite someone, then they'll be doing what they're doing. You'll say stuff back, you'll have this back and forth conversation, and you'll end up talking a lot more because you haven't created a world. And by that I mean you haven't created your environment in the mind's eye of the audience. So whatever space you've got, often we perform with Extreme Improv at the Camden Comedy Club in London. And incidentally, we've got a show there on Thursday the 23rd of January 2020, just in case you're listening to this in the future. We're there pretty much every month, so check us out, www.extremeimprov.co.uk. Got my plug in there. But anyway, what I was going to say is the Camden Comedy Club has a very small stage. It's more geared towards stand-up comedy acts, but it's one of our most regular venues we've been to. Probably the venue we've performed at most, because we like the audience, we have a regular audience there, and it's great. But anyway, it's a very small stage, but sometimes you'll be on a smaller stage and sometimes you'll be on a much bigger stage. And if you're on a bigger stage, you can do what I'm about to say even more. But regardless, whatever size stage you are on, if you move about and set up where the doors are, set up where the seats are, where the safe is that you go to get the money and the documents, where the fridge is or whatever, and you go and interact with things, then it means that you're not just stood there feeling pressured to keep speaking constantly. You will actually inevitably share the stage more and share the scene more with your scene partner, just by taking your time over using objects and locations which you're miming, working with invisible objects that are around you. And it will also, as a bonus tip out of this, it will help inspire you for what else you can do in your scene. Because if you have two people stood facing opposite each other and you're visiting a doctor, say, and it's a doctor and a patient relationship, you could stand there and talk. Well, doctor, what's wrong with me? Well, I'm afraid you've got this illness and you're going to die. And what? How did I catch that? Well, have you ever been to the Amazon rainforest? Because there's this mosquito there that's such and such. And you're just talking. However, you could take that same scenario and the doctor could say, I need to run a few tests. If you come over here and you start miming that you're putting on the blood pressure machine, the cuff over your arm to take your blood pressure, and then okay, now come over here and stand on the scales, then it will slow down it won't actually slow down the scene, but it will just mean that you've got a little bit more breathing room where you're not going to be talking constantly, where you can be doing things. It gives you, and it's not just empty space, it's filling the time with things that you're actually doing. And because you're setting up about the environment, it might be that, oh well, you've taken my blood now, can we weigh myself again? Because I think you took like 7 pounds worth of blood, or 7 pints, which obviously has a weight as well, but you only ever measure it in units for liquids. But and I don't know what the conversion would be, but you know what I mean. And it will just, by creating your environment, it might inspire more things for you to do, which will in turn allow you to share the stage, share the space, share the dialogue, share the time that much more. So I promised myself before I started this that this episode was going to be about 10 minutes long, and it's almost 25, so I'm going to start to wrap things up now. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it useful. By all means, Extreme Improv has got lots of ways, social media or email or websites or whatever, for you to interact with and get in touch with us. And I'd love to hear some feedback on these shows. So this is the Extreme Improv podcast skills show. and we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we're on YouTube. All you need to do is search Extreme Improv. Our website with all of these links and much more on is www.extremeimprov.co.uk. Once again, I'll mention that on the 23rd of January we have a show, and that's 2020. We have a show at the Camden Comedy Club at 8 PM in London. So by all means, do come along and see us live. You'll see some of the skills that I talk about each week put into practice. And yeah, my name is David Pustansky. You can find me on Twitter. I'll spell my surname because you wouldn't know how to spell it probably otherwise, which is Pustansky. That's David Pustansky. So, until next time, please like, share and subscribe. Tell all of your friends and improviser friends and actor friends about the Extreme Improv Podcast Skill Show. Do check out some of our other shows. We've got the Extreme Improv Radio Rumble and the Extreme Improv Podcast Chat shows, and then lots of other podcasts. The Super Kick Mania Pro Wrestling Podcast, the Games Monster Podcast, which is about video games, the Mega Movie Podcast, and soon we'll be launching the Extreme Improv Book Club as well. So lots and lots to look forward to. So I hope you have a good rest of your day, a good rest of your week, and until next time, thank you very much, and goodbye, Ziz!